Hey everybody, Seth coming to you from the middle of nowhere, and today I just want to do a brief update on my new PC build, Project Northern Lights. Name courtesy of my wife's suggestion from my wife, which I really like, especially in light of all the rainbows. So as you can see, we have a fully turned on and plumbed and water-cooled computer. Only exception being, of course, is the graphics card is not yet water-cooled. I have parts for that coming in the mail. I did my leak testing over the weekend, and for about 14 hours with the computer completely turned off and just an external PSU, I went ahead and leak tested the computer. Had a small leak right here at the fitting, so it's a good location for it because I could easily get to it and just tighten it up. And I'll do a tour of the fittings in a moment as well, just to kind of give you an idea of all the fittings that were required. So the graphics card, as you can see, like I said, not yet cooled by a water block. That should be coming Tuesday, and hopefully Thursday I'll be able to install it. I went with a GTX 1080, fun story. My GTX 970 Hall of Fame edition from Galax would not fit in this case for probably two reasons, really. One, it was extremely long and went almost to the reservoir, definitely where this tube is. Secondly, it was too tall. Essentially, the card was smacking against this plastic shroud, not right here where the I/O is, but further down, as well as there's a button on the back of the card that sends the fans into ludicrous speed, and that was running interference on the PCI slots right here because there's a bit of metal that juts out. So rather than really trying to cram it in there, breaking the card, or mucking up the paint, or scuffing up the motherboard, or breaking that, I decided to just say, no, let's go get a graphics card. And so Best Buy, my local Best Buy, luckily had GTX 1080 Founders Edition in stock, so I used my rewards, so I even got $5 off, and went and got it. And I like the Founders Edition in terms of its size. It's small enough that I won't have any issues once I put a water block on it with this case. As I mentioned in my overview of the PC-O11 Dynamic, graphics cards, depending on their size, and then when you add a water block, can really run into the clearance issues for the standard horizontal insertion. So be aware of that should you get this case and have a big beefy card like for the Win Edition 3 or an Asus Strix. Those cards can fit vertically, of course. The Asus one can fit with water block provided from EK, provided you take some plastic bits off. And then I think it can fit otherwise from like bits power and stuff like that. But just do your due diligence, make sure your card with a water block will fit before either one, deciding on this case, or two, deciding to try and water cool with a GPU with it. I got my cable mod cables over the weekend as well, which made me happy. So they're installed here. You can kind of see it. The computer's running really well. Haven't had any blue screens or anything like that. I have not yet overclocked the CPU. The RAM is overclocked to 3000 megahertz with cast latency 14 timings. No hitches there. A couple weeks ago I did extensive tweaking and overclocking of the RAM to make sure it would work. Unfortunately, could not get, with 4 sticks, 3200 speeds to be stable. Now this is again a 64 gig kit, so apparently Ryzen doesn't necessarily like 1, 4 sticks, 2, 64 gigs. So if you are getting a Ryzen board, be aware that 2 sticks, 32 gigs, probably your safe bet. I have gotten 2 sticks stable at 3200 megahertz speeds, so that's a good thing. So it definitely works, but someone has to pioneer, right? So went with 64 gigs, 4 sticks. I got 3000 stable. I can boot into 3200, but I end up with memory errors. I haven't pushed it, so I haven't had any kind of blue screens, but I will be tinkering and I will be updating you guys on that on my overclock escapades. It's been real fun and pleasure to build in this case. It has not been that hard at all. With regards to the top rad, before I got all the screws in there. What are there, like 16 or something like that? 12. There's a lot of play in terms of positioning, like backwards and forwards. I would say there's a good 1.5 cm to roughly an inch, depending on how you want to go with imperial or metric. There's about a good centimeter of play for back and forth movement, so you can determine where you want to position it. One thing I do have that's a criticism is if you have anything on the bottom that has screws from the bottom, or even if they just jut out through the bottom or whatever, the filter has a hard time staying connected because those screws essentially run interference with the magnets. So my suggestion to Lian Li would be to invest in a better kind of magnetic filter or whatever placement wise, because otherwise it won't stay, and it's very key because this is intake. So I want to have my filters stay on. A suggestion, or recommendation rather, if you're building in this case and you're doing a bottom radiator, plug in every single cable that goes to the bottom of the motherboard first, whether you think you'll need it now or later, even if it's not going to terminate in a connection. So let's say, because this Crosshair 7 has a bottom addressable RGB and non-addressable RGB inputs, if you think you're going to have something RGB there in the future, plug it in, or at least plug in an extension now. It'll save you time, it'll save you stress. Yes, it's another cable, but hey, it's better than not. Anything on the USB 2, definitely, make sure that's all plugged in. For me personally, I think I should be okay. The water block for the graphics card that I got is going to be RGB, so I will probably, once I drain the loop, and because I'm going to have to redo this tube, because that's going to go to the graphics card, and then the graphics card will go to the monoblock, and then the radiators. But anyway, I'll probably have to do some repositioning, undo this radiator so I can get access to the RGB header. If you guys have any questions for me, please leave comments in below. And other than that, let's give you a close-up tour of Project Northern Lights. So here we are, we're going to do a fittings tour. We're starting with the pump and res. This is the outlet port. So from here, you can kind of see, just here, we have our T-fitting. Before that, we actually have a male-to-male extender, and I want to say it's like 6 millimeters. So don't quote me on that. I'm going to look it up, and then I'll put a little note right above where I'm talking. So anyway, we have a male-to-male connection, followed by our T-splitter. This is an awesome cube with a EK badge. I'm really happy I was able to align that right. To the right of that, we have a 90-degree rotary fitting, followed by a drain valve, and on that we have a Mayhem's black chrome plug. To the left, we have our standard 12mm outer diameter hardline fitting, followed by a very teeny tiny tube to another hardline adapter. I didn't want to just do constant adapters or whatever, have an extension followed by another male-to-male to this. I wanted a little bit of tube, and I know you can barely see it, but it's kind of cool. So beyond that, we have our 90-degree rotary, followed by a dual 45-degree rotary, followed to another 90-degree rotary. So we have kind of a cool little pattern going on here. And once again, all my fittings are black chrome. We are dealing with mostly EK, but we do for our plugs, as I showed you with the drain valve. And up here have Mayhem's plugs, again in black chrome. And then for the downspout, we have a black sparkle, which is BitsPower's version of black chrome. And I'm really happy to say that there's a lot of good consistency in the coloring. So all the black chrome, black sparkle, what have you, it looks exactly identical from fitting to fitting. Now, to the outlet of this radiator, and again this is the EK radiator, we have a 20mm extender, followed by a 90-degree rotary. Coming around to our 12mm hardline fitting for exhaust. Our outlet to the inlet of the top rad, we have our hardline fitting, followed by a 20mm extender. Coming around back to the outlet of the top radiator, we have 3 fittings: our 12mm hardline, followed by a 90-degree rotary, which is connected to a dual 45-degree rotary fitting. So coming from the inlet of the back pre-much radiator, we have ourselves a 20 millimeter extender, followed by an 8 millimeter extender, followed by a 90-degree rotary, followed by possibly another 8 millimeter extender. I think that is the case, followed by our dual 45-degree rotary. Make sure you guys can see all this. Yep, okay. And then a 90-degree rotary to our fitting. You can see just the tight fit. I mean, there's very little clearance between that 90-degree. I mean, it's half a millimeter, I'm not gonna lie. It might even be touching. Very small clearance between that 90-degree and this radiator here. The EK housing it does add a lot of dimensions to it. So coming out of the pre-chill radiator for the outlet, we've got ourselves a 8 millimeter extender, followed by a dual 45-degree rotary, followed by a 45-degree rotary to our 12 millimeter fitting, a small little bit of tubing to another fitting to our 45-degree rotary. That completes all the fittings. For the tubing, I'm glad I went with 12 millimeter outer diameter. I think 16 might have filled up the space entirely too much. Possibly. I don't know. It would still be fun to test it out at some point. Oh, I did want to go over what's holding the res to the fans, and that is Singularity Computers brackets. These are really nice, I'd have to say. There's no scratching of the reservoir because there's some protective kind of rubbery contacts that are affixed to the metal, and this is metal. It only comes, though, it does not come with longer hex screws. I'll get to these in a minute. It does come with screws for attaching to the reservoir. I went with two because I wanted the stability. So I got a bottom one here and then the top one. I went with two because I really didn't want any accidental kind of leaning, if you will. Don't need a leaning tower of reservoir. They're really slick. They're lined up. They come in black and silver. There's a silver color too. There might even be some other colors like red. The pre-chill radiator uses M3 style screws. The standard 30 millimeter screws that you would put through the fan into the radiator, and also that has to go through the metal, too short. So I had to find 35 millimeter screws, which were perfect length. You might be able to get away with 40, and they are hex screws, whereas the rest of the fans are all Phillips head. So these are hex based. But anyway, a couple extra, purchases, trying to get this done, and that's okay. Well, that's it for me, guys. Just a brief update on Project Northern Lights. Hope you enjoyed watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share any questions you might have down below, follow me on social media, and I'll see you next time in the middle of nowhere. Let me kitty cat cat. Let me meow meow and a meow meow meow.